So,
you want to collect Nintendo Switch stuff?
Well, you've come to the right place, because I have been collecting for the Nintendo Switch essentially since the day that it released in North America. In fact, this is my Nintendo Switch that I got on launch night of March 3, 2017. And this is what you can expect to get if you get a Switch for yourself. Most of you probably know what a Switch is by now. This is a Nintendo Switch. And it allows for you to play games in handheld mode, or if you put it into this dock and plug the dock into the TV, you can play it in docked mode, which allows for you to play all your games on the big screen. Now, there are several sorts of Switches that you can go after. This is the launch day one that I got. This is what the box looks like. There's been a revised model that has since come out not too long ago. The box looks like this. It's all red and it has a different design on it. So that's how you'll know that it's a newer one. And if you were to get a Switch now, that would be the one that I recommend, because it's essentially the same as a launch day Switch, except the battery is insanely improved. Like, it can last almost twice as long as the old one. But there are also themed Switches that you can get, such as this Let's Go themed Switch that came out with Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. There's actually two box variants for this, but the Switch itself is identical in every way. So this comes with the dock, the Switch, and special Joy-Cons that you can only get with this bundle, as well as a download code for Let's Go Pikachu, or if you get the other one, Let's Go Eevee, and a Pokeball Plus. There's all sorts of different variants that you can get for the Nintendo Switch. Some of them only have different Joy-Con colors. Some of them don't even have anything different about them. They just come with a game code. Do some research and see what kind of Switches there are out there before you commit to buying one, just to make sure that you get the one that you want. There is, of course, also the Switch Lite that has just come out. I do not have one of those yet. The Switch Lite is the Switch by itself. The Joy-Cons do not come off like this. They are permanently attached to the system, and you cannot dock it to the TV. It's only in handheld mode, but it's only $200 US instead of $300. So if you don't think that you'll be playing on your TV that much, that's probably a better choice for you. The Switch Lite comes in all sorts of different colors, and there will be more in the future, so be on the lookout for those. Now, one of the most important things for the Switch is the ability to play it, obviously. So, there are all sorts of different Joy-Con colors that you can get. In fact, I have all sorts of different Joy-Cons, and that's why I went with the blue and green to put on my main Switch here. That is just the color combo that I like the most. No Joy-Con is ever permanently linked to a specific Switch. If you have any Joy-Cons whatsoever, all you need to do is slide them onto the Switch itself, and it instantly joins. And it charges from the Switch, so as long as you just leave them on the Switch when you're not playing it, then they work permanently. If you're more of a pro gamer, or you want that pro gamer feel, then I recommend getting a Pro Controller. I have several Pro Controllers. They're also great for if you have company over. They cost a little bit extra. They cost like $70, $75, but they feel amazing in your hand. They're a great feel. And just like the Joy-Cons, they come in all sorts of different kinds. So as you can see, I have this Splatoon 2 themed Pro Controller. I have several other Pro Controllers. There's half a dozen different kinds of Pro Controllers out there. So if you want a Pro Controller, then you have options of what you want to go after. Just do some research, see what exists, and don't overpay. Some of the more limited variants of the Pro Controller will go for a lot on eBay. Don't overpay for them. No need for that. Just get one that you like, but don't overpay for it. There are some other accessories that you might want to consider getting for your Nintendo Switch, including the NES and Super Nintendo Joy-Con-like controllers. Now, if you sign up for Nintendo Switch Online, then you have access to these, but only through Nintendo's website. And it's, I believe, limited to one per household, if I remember right. But if you play those NES and Super Nintendo games on Switch Online, this is definitely something for you, so that you're able to play them with just as authentic of a feel as you can. You might also consider getting a second dock for your Switch. The Switch is not tied to any dock. It'll fit in any dock in the world that is made for the Switch, so you might want to consider getting a second or even a third dock to put in all the different TVs in your house, so you don't have to be tied to one TV. If you are in the living room but you want to take it to your bedroom, you can just buy a second dock, pick the Switch up from one dock, put it in the other. Easy as that. You might also want to consider getting a sleeve for your Switch, a traveling case. This one is really simple. It just holds the Switch and the Joy-Cons and maybe a few games if you throw them loose in there. This is super cheap, but you might consider getting something a bit more substantial, like this case that I have here. This one can fit your Switch, it can fit games in it, and in fact, this has USB power in it, so if you wish, you can charge up the case before you leave for a trip or on vacation, and you can leave your Switch in here plugged in and charge the Switch from the case. Obviously, this one costs a lot more than the other one, but all sorts of solutions exist for a traveling case for your Switch. There are some other accessories that you might want depending on what games you play. For example, Amiibo have been a thing since the Wii U days. This Amiibo, the Link Amiibo from Super Smash Bros., released on the same day as Super Smash Bros. For the Wii U in North America in November 2014. In the past 5 years, we have over 200 Amiibo that have released, and there are not that many Switch games that support use of Amiibo, but a lot of them do, and the biggest one is Super Smash Bros., and Amiibo work better in there than almost any other game. So if you like these little figurines, do a lot of research on Amiibo. There's plenty of websites out there that'll help you on figuring Amiibo out. And the other accessory I would recommend if you're a Pokemon fan is the Pokeball Plus. Now, there are ways for you to buy this on its own. There are ways for you to buy this, for example, if you got this bundle with the Switch, this came with an extra one. There's a bundle with Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee that comes with one. But if you are a Pokemon fan, I recommend getting one of these. This connects with the Let's Go games, and it will connect with Pokemon Sword and Shield next month. You can put a Pokemon from those games into this and walk around in the real world and earn experience with it. If you're familiar with the Pokewalker from Heart Gold Soul Silver, it's very similar to that. This also connects with Pokemon Go and acts as a Pokemon Go Plus, if you like playing Pokemon Go. And whenever you buy one brand new, not used, it comes with a Mew already inside, and that's currently the only way to get Mew in any of the Pokemon Switch games. So for $50, but you can get it for as low as $40, I think it's definitely a worthwhile accessory if you are a Switch fan. And let's see, let's go ahead and show off a few other things that you might want to consider as well. If you want to play Super Smash Bros. Competitively, then I recommend getting one of these. This is a was for the Wii U, but this is a Gamecube controller adapter. It can connect up to 4 Gamecube controllers, and you plug it into your Switch's dock, and that allows for you to use Gamecube controllers with use on Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. I believe it works for a few other games as well, but it's really mostly recommended for Smash Ultimate. So if you like playing Super Smash Bros., that's for you. And, of course, the Switch's internal capacity is only 32 gigabytes, so I recommend getting a micro SD card. I recommend at least a 64 gig card. If you're absolutely serious about collecting, I recommend at least a 128 gig card, and honestly, the more capacity, the better. I recently upgraded my main Switch to have a 400 gigabyte card on it, and even that's filling up, so definitely pick up one or more of these micro SD cards. Like I said, the higher capacity, the better. So now it's time to get into the games, and you can probably see I have a lot to show you here. That's because there's a lot that you need to keep in mind as a Switch collector. There are a few websites I recommend to help you stay up to date on Switch collecting. One is JP Switch Mania, another is the Nintendo Switch Collector subreddit, and I'll be linking all of this in the description. I also recommend that you follow as many collectors as you can on Twitter or on Facebook and Facebook groups that focus on Switch collecting, because there's been plenty of times when I thought I had every single game accounted for on my list of games released, and there was always one or two that I was missing. This really is a group collective effort of people really working together to make sure that every single game is accounted for. So the biggest thing you can do for yourself is get connected and follow everyone and just stay as up to date as possible on what is coming out and when. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the games. So I'll actually focus on this first. You might see these big boxes in retail stores. These are Nintendo Labo boxes, and Labo is a thing that Nintendo has done where you can get these cardboard kits and put them together, and there are currently 4 different kits. This one was VR. It comes with VR goggles, although you can buy the goggles separately. And you can distinguish them on your shelf because they come with this black label instead of the red label that most other Nintendo games come with. So, Labo, be on the lookout for that. Another thing to be on the lookout for, another special thing, is Steelbooks. Now, I have this Steelbook from Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. This was released in the United States eventually as a Best Buy exclusive. It's long gone now. But it was originally released in Japan as a, I believe, 7-Eleven exclusive, believe it or not. So, a lot of people love collecting Steelbooks. There's a lot of Nintendo Steelbooks out there. This just happens to be the only one I have. So if you are into Steelbooks at all, be on the lookout. Get those connections like I talked about before so you know what Steelbooks exist and where to find them. Okay, let me go ahead and get into these games here. So your average Nintendo Switch game looks like this. This is The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. This is my launch day edition. It's just the case and the game inside the case. I'd say 90% of Nintendo Switch games are like this. There are some games that are exclusive to other regions of the world. For example, Unravel 2 here was only released in Europe and Japan, so I imported the European version because it was not released in North America. Some games have an English release, but only in Asia. For example, World of Final Fantasy Maxima. That was only released in Asia, but it does have an all-English release. There are other games that were released in America, but were not physically released in North America, but did get a physical release in Japan. For example, Rockman X2 Legacy Collection, which is our equivalent of Mega Man X2 Legacy Collection. We got Mega Man X1, but X2 was a download only. You just really got to familiarize yourself. This will take a long time to really remember what goes where. I recommend a spreadsheet. I recommend just hooking up with people who know all this already and getting their lists of these sorts of games that did get a release here but were digital only but got a physical release somewhere else. There were a lot of games that came with physical goodies. For example, the launch edition of It'll Do 2, actually I believe every edition of It'll Do 2 came with these extra goodies inside. So an instruction booklet, a little treasure map. Some games, particularly the ones from Nicalis, usually have the goodies in them. Some games that were released only had the goodies in the Day 1 edition, so only the first printing of the games had goodies in them, like this copy of The Binding of Isaac Afterbirth Plus, and some games actually have more than one cover to them. This is the first printing edition of Binding of Isaac, like I just said. The second edition has a completely different cover, so if you like collecting cover variants, there are a few games that have cover variants. Another thing you'll want to be on the lookout for is retail exclusives. Has-Been Heroes is a GameStop exclusive. Not only is it a GameStop exclusive, but there are variants of it. You see the spine here, how it has those big letters right there? That's not standard, and Nintendo politely asked for their next printing to have it in standard to match the spines of other games. So this is a Day 1 edition Has-Been Heroes. There's 2 others that I know of. I don't remember the differences between those 2, but that is something to be on the lookout for, is not only retail exclusives, but variations of those exclusives. Another thing is retail exclusives that are exclusive to Amazon. For example, Galgun 2. you will not find this game on store shelves. This was only ever released on Amazon.com. I believe it's still there if you want it, but my point is, you will not see this in a store. You need to know it exists by looking at those lists and just knowing in advance that it got a physical release. You will get some games that have differences between them. For example, Sonic Forces came with 2 editions at launch. This one is the bonus edition, which comes with some stickers inside for you to put on your Joy-Con. But there was also a version that released at launch that was just the standard edition, and it did not come with those. And the way you can tell the difference with that is that this says bonus edition, the other one says standard edition. So you just got to familiarize yourself with what games came with what during what editions. Like, it really gets into a mess. I stay out of that, but there are people who care about variants. You might be one of them. That's just something to be on the lookout for. Another thing to be on the lookout for is sports games or variations therein. For example, NBA 2K19, this is just the standard edition. You can get it for $60. But there were also other editions, like the Gold Edition. But that just came with a bunch of extras in-game, not in the case itself. Basically, it's just a different cover for $40 extra. The cartridge itself inside, I believe, has the exact same data on it as everything else. So it's strictly a cover variant, but it is not a different game. So if you see NBA 2K19 and NBA 2K19 Gold Edition, don't worry, they're not 2 different games that you have to account for. They're one game, 2 different editions of the game. You also have to look out for some very interesting cases. For example, the English version of Final Fantasy X and X-2, you need to download X-2, and it only works for that exact cartridge of 10. But Japan, their version of Final Fantasy X and X-2 actually has X-2 on the cartridge. So if you're the kind of person who wants as much of the game on the cartridge as possible without having to download anything else, this is what I would recommend you get. There's not many games that this example applies to, but this is one of them. That's why I have 2 copies, because technically, to me, this is 2 different games. Speaking of importing things from Japan, there are a lot of games that look completely in Japanese just based off the cover, but they do play fully in English. Not every game does, but Okami HD is one of them. In fact, there are some games that have a Japanese and an English cover, but they both play in English just fine. This Japanese copy of I Am Setsuna, there is an English cover for it, but the cartridge is exactly the same. So I just went with the Japanese copy because frankly it's cheaper. There's some other Japanese games that I would recommend you get, just because even though, like I said, it looks completely in Japanese on the cover, it plays in English, like Chocobo Mystery Dungeon, but not every Japanese game will do that. For example, my collection of Mana from Japan that I picked up in 2017 does not play in English. So if you see the Japanese version and you think this is an easy way to get a collection of Mana, it doesn't play in English, and since this is an RPG, I would not recommend you get this unless you are fluent in Japanese. Finally, there are some interesting cases you might want to be on the lookout for. Display cases. This is a display case that was presented in GameStop for you to buy the expansion pass for Breath of the Wild, Legend of Zelda. There was nothing inside this, completely empty. It's just a piece of paper inside of a Switch case, but these are pretty cool because they're display pieces that were only ever meant for GameStop to display, never for you to actually take home with you. So things like this do exist. Another thing to think about is an example I do not have here with me. Games that you buy in store but do not have a cartridge inside. There are a few games, and it's becoming more and more common, that you buy in the store for full price, but the only thing inside is not a cartridge, but a download code. Overwatch is probably going to be the biggest example of this. I will be getting that. But that's just something to be on the lookout for, is not every game you see in the store has a cartridge inside. Some of them have download codes. Luckily, there should be an orange banner at the top making that very clear, but it's just something to be on the lookout for. Another thing to be on the lookout for is insanely rare games. How rare? This is, as far as I know, the rarest Switch game in existence right now. Bayonetta 1 physical from Japan. This was part of the Climax Edition. I gave away the rest of the contents to a friend who really wanted it more than I did. Physical version of Bayonetta 1, there's only 11,000 copies in the world. This is another one of those games that it looks like it's all in Japanese, but it'll play just fine in English. I played through the whole campaign in English on my Switch with this cartridge. So there are some insanely rare games that you have to be on the lookout for. If you see a copy of Bayonetta 1 and it's real, jump on it. They can get really expensive. Just fair warning. Limited print games can get expensive, and we'll talk more about them later. Something else to be on the lookout for is games like this, Tokyo School Life. This is a North American game, but it was not released in the United States. There are now, and there will be more in the future, video games that are released in Canada, and there will probably be some released in Mexico. So if you're going for a full North American set, you're going to have to decide what defines North America. Is Canada, are Canadian exclusive games on Canadian online stores part of that for you, or are you just going for United States released games? You really have to think about what you're going after. Are you just going after the games you love? Are you going after everything you can? If you're doing that, it's going to get expensive real fast. So speaking of limited print, there are, as of right now, 8 companies that make numbered sets of games that have a strict print number to them. For example, Limited Run Games, making games like Shantae and the Pirate's Curse. What Limited Run Games does is they open up their game pre-orders for 2 weeks to a month, and they just take, anyone who wants a game, you just set your order in, they'll order that number and they'll ship it to you. They're the only company that does that right now. Most other companies will get a set number of games, sell them, and once they're sold out, that's it. So if you're getting into Switch collecting, limited print right now is the most difficult thing that you need to go after. You're going to need to decide if you're going after just the games from Limited Run Games, or if you're going after them and another company, or if you're going after every single company. Trust me, there's so many companies right now, many more who have stated their intentions in the future. So Limited Run Games right now has released 48 games, and there's others in the future. And there's other examples as well. But another thing that they do, that no other limited print company does, is they release the games in Best Buy. Best Buy actually picks up a few thousand copies, sometimes not always, of their games and releases it in their stores with an alternate cover. So this is the Best Buy variant of Luminous, for example. Like I said, some games, not all, so you can either take your chances and skip out on a limited print in case it gets a Best Buy release later. You can just go to the store, or you can pick it up online where it's guaranteed. Up to you. Another thing that is becoming more and more common these days, in fact I wouldn't be surprised if eventually this becomes the norm, is online retailers making these, selling these games, distributing these games instead of brick and mortar store retailers. For example, Limited Run Games were the sole distributor of Oceanhorn and Layers of Fear Legacy. They were not part of their limited print series, so like this is just an unnumbered release, but they were the sole distributors of these games. So there are quite a few of these companies that have popped up as well that are separate from limited print companies, but they are the sole distributor of the games. For example, Retro City Rampage by V-Blank. This is a very hard to find game, trust me, but that's because the only people who made it and the only people who distributed it were V-Blank. You cannot find this in any store. You cannot find it online except on eBay. So you have to pay attention to those kinds of games now as well. Not limited print, but limited distribution. It's getting to be really hard to keep up with all of them. Like I said, just follow every account you can on social media to be as up to date as possible to make sure you're on top of things. So now let's get into the collector's editions. There are many collector's editions that you'll want to be on the lookout for. Some of them are, I say most of them you can only find online, even if the game got a retail release. For example, my special edition of Toho Kubodo 5, this is online exclusive. It was not released in stores, even though the game itself was. So there's many collector's editions, and if you like the idea of having collector's editions, just go online and look and see if a game has a collector's edition. Odds are it does, but I'm warning you, odds are it's sold out months or years ago. Some games have collector's editions that were actually sold in stores. Like this collector's edition of Octopath Traveler just comes with a lot of extra goodies. Obviously it costs a lot more, but to a lot of people, the stuff inside that makes it a collector's item is definitely worth it. So if you like collector's editions, then I highly recommend you check out this stuff as well. And then the final kind of collector's edition there is the one for limited print games. So limited run games, most of the time, but not always, they have two versions of the games they release. The standard edition, which is the game by itself, and the collector's edition, which comes with the game and all sorts of other goodies. So, like for example, this copy of Fox and Forest from Strictly Limited Games comes with the game. It comes with all this beautiful artwork and stickers and an art book and just all sorts of extra things that, to a lot of people, make the extra cost worth it. Speaking of Strictly Limited Games, another thing you got to be on the lookout for is individually numbered releases. So, for example, Fox and Forest, this copy I have is number 290. So, with however many copies of this game they made, they individually numbered every single copy between 1 and I believe 3,000, 4,000, one of those, and printed that onto the case itself. So if you're in the lookout for that kind of thing, trying to get a low number or a specific number, when you check eBay listings, be on the lookout for that. You cannot ask for specific numbers from the distributor. It's always completely random what you get. But if you're looking for a low number, you might luck out on eBay and find someone who is selling one for an okay price. I'm not saying it's going to be cheap. Nothing about this hobby is cheap. But you might be happy with what you can find. So that wraps up this beginner's guide for collecting for the Nintendo Switch. Once again, make sure you follow the links in the description in order to stay up to date with any new developments for the Switch. This console has been out for 2.5 years now, and I could definitely see it having a life of another 5 years beyond now. It's really exciting to see how far it's come, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes in the future. Make sure to hit the like button and make sure to subscribe so that you stay tuned for future content. And thank you so much for watching.